evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Equine Essentials. I'm your host, Gray Parks, Equine Sales Specialist for ProTrition Feed, and I'm here today to talk with you about common myths and misperceptions when it comes to equine nutrition. So things that you've probably heard over and over and over again for decades that it turns out aren't actually true about equine nutrition. I don't know that I would call these the top 5 most common. There probably are others that you could argue are also right up there, but I'm going to give you 5 very common misconceptions that I hear a lot from horse owners and out in the horse industry, and help clear those up and hopefully alleviate some confusion for you. So we're going to start off with what I think is probably one of the most common misconceptions, and it has to do with protein. I hear this all the time. I can't feed my horse a high protein feed, it'll make him hot, right? Or I can't feed him alfalfa, it's too high in protein, it will make him hot. And this just simply isn't true. Protein, yes, is a calorie source, just like fat and carbohydrates. However, it's a metabolically inefficient calorie source. It takes a lot of energy for the body to break down protein into a form that can be used for energy. Therefore, it's not a preferred energy source for the body, and it's also not a very efficient one, not something that's going to provide a lot of quick turnaround energy for a body of any species, especially including horses. What can happen is that there are feeds that are higher in protein, say a performance horse grain, that are also high in calories and or high in sugars and starches. And if you feed anything too many calories, it's going to get fat, and it may also get additional energy. And some horses, just like some people, don't do well on any kind of diet that contains a lot of sugar and starch. Just like some children, they can get excess unwanted energy when we feed them too much sugar and starch. So when it comes to grains, it's much more common that sugar and starch might cause your horse to be hot than it is that it's the protein in the grain. So something like a ration balancer, for example, Pinnacle Balancer is 28% protein. Purina Enrich Plus is 32% protein. Often horse owners will look at those labels and think, oh no, that's way too much protein. My horse is going to get crazy on a ration balancer. It's important to keep in mind the feeding rate of those products. So Pinnacle Balancer at 28% makes this math really easy. 2 pounds of Pinnacle Balancer will provide exactly the same amount of protein as 4 pounds of a 14% protein grain. So the balancer doesn't actually have more protein than a regular feed if you feed it as directed, and if you feed the regular feed as directed. With alfalfa, there's an additional complication that alfalfa is generally going to be higher in calories than most grass hay. So again, you can get a fat horse, you can get excess energy that way. And then there are a select few horses that react badly to alfalfa. Just like some people can't tolerate certain feedstuffs, feed ingredients, some horses can't tolerate alfalfa. They're not that many, but they are out there. It has nothing to do with the protein amount in the alfalfa. It is the alfalfa itself. Just like some people can't eat meat, some people can't eat wheat, some people are allergic to strawberries. It's not an allergy in the horse's case, but there is certainly an intolerance or a reaction sometimes. So have no fear, protein won't make your horse nervous. It also won't make them hot in hot weather. It's not how protein works. Nor will it damage their kidneys. Barring some type of disease or damage to the horse's kidneys, then there's no concern about protein. Yes, they will drink more water. Yes, they will urinate more to clear any excess protein, but you're not actually damaging their kidneys. So no need to be afraid of protein in your horse's diet. Feed the right product at the right level based on your horse's needs, and you're good to go there. The second one, very, very popular this time of year as it gets cold, is, well, I'm going to give my horse a bran mash tonight to prevent colic. This one's as old as the horse industry, right? This has been a tradition for centuries, but it's a bad idea. And so sorry to burst a bubble there, but there are a couple of reasons that bran in particular is not a great idea in a bran mash sort of scenario. One is that anytime you rapidly change the horse's diet. So he gets a bran mash tonight for the first time in 12 months. You run the risk of digestive upset because the horse's system is not designed for rapid changes in diet. Consistency is critical for efficient digestion and for gut health. So you could actually cause the horse a colic by feeding it something it's not used to. The other issue with bran is that it can be a bit of a laxative, right? Both because you've caused digestive upset with a new feed, and just because of what bran is, there can be a laxative effect. So you actually could see some diarrhea as a result of this. But there are better ways to ensure your horse is going to drink well in cold weather. One of those is adding salt to their feed to help them drink a little bit more. The other is just making a mash out of whatever the horse regularly eats. So on cold winter days, I'll bring a pitcher of hot water to the barn when I feed, and everybody gets hot water added to whatever they normally eat. They're happy. They're getting a little extra water. Makes me feel good. No harm, no foul there. Bran can also have an issue in that it has an inverted calcium to phosphorus ratio. So you can actually upset the mineral balance of the horse's diet by adding bran in large quantities. So no matter how good it smells, no matter how many horsemen swear by it, please don't feed your horse a bran mash in an effort to prevent colic, because you might actually cause colic by doing that. The next one, again, one of those that we've heard forever and ever and ever, and it comes in a lot of varieties, has to do with a condition called choke. Some horses choke for a variety of reasons. Generally, once a horse has choked once, it is much more likely to continue to do that forever going forward because of scar tissue in the esophagus. But choke can happen no matter what the horse is eating. And the myth and misconception part of this is you'll hear very often that X causes choke. So beet pulp gets a lot of bad press here. I can't feed beet pulp dry, it'll cause my horse to choke. I can't feed my horse pellets of any sort, it'll cause the horse to choke. Statistically and research-wise, that's not true. There's no particular feed or type of feed or feed ingredient that is more likely to cause choke than any other feed. So there have actually been some research studies where horses got up to half of their total daily feed, so hay, grain, everything combined, as dry, unsoaked beet pulp, and there were no chokes. So we know that it's not the presence of dried beet pulp. And in fact, most senior feeds, if you look at them, contain shredded beet pulp. And certainly not all or even most of those feeds are fed soaked either. But there are certain types of horses that are more likely to choke. And there's another reason that you might want to soak your beet pulp that I'll get to in a second. So horses that choke generally are horses that have dental issues. So senior horses with poor teeth. Young horses that are in the process of shedding caps might be a little uncomfortable chewing and not chew well and choke. Horses that are fed in group settings where they feel competitive and try to wolf down their feed really fast, or horses that just bolt their feed in general. Horses that are fed from an elevated feeder versus the ground feeder, or a very shallow bucket versus a wide, shallow pan. Those are all horses that are more likely to choke. And any of those kinds of horses or horses that have choked before should get all of their feed soaked, whether it's a textured feed, a pelleted feed, beet pulp, whatever they're eating should be fed soaked to prevent choke. But there is a good reason for soaking beet pulp that is unrelated to choke. And that is that beet pulp, isn't very palatable when it's dry by itself. So most horses will not eat it when it's dry. And also it absorbs a lot of water. So it's a great way to get extra water in the horse. So again, if you want to give a hot mash in the mornings, beet pulp is a really, really good medium for doing that. Just don't suddenly add it today. They've never had beet pulp before. Feed the same amount you do every day, but it makes a really good mash. It makes it more palatable. There's no reason not to soak it, but feeding it dry does not cause any more choke than any other feed out there. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with that, but that is the science of beet pulp. The next one equally has a lot of people that have very strong opinions about that, and that is the presence of byproducts in horse feeds. I hear a lot of times that byproducts are low quality filler, or byproducts are floor sweepings and they're just there to make the feed cheaper. And that is very much not true, especially the floor sweepings part of it. Byproducts are a way for us to get specifically targeted nutrients into a feed. Sometimes they reduce cost, sometimes they add cost to the feed. It depends upon the byproduct. So an example, bee pulp is a byproduct of processing sugar beets into sugar. You pull out the sugar and what's left is the pulp, which would normally be thrown away, but we can use in livestock feeds as a high quality, highly soluble fiber source. Soy hulls, also a really great fiber source that are a byproduct. Wheat middlings are ones that I get a lot of questions about. Wheat middlings are a byproduct of flour production, but they leave you with a relatively high protein, lower starch, not low, but lower starch ingredient that can be very useful in feed production. There are lots and lots and lots of byproducts out there in the feed industry. They're there for a reason. And distillers grains, for example, another one, distillers grains, a relatively high energy, higher protein version of than what the grain itself. So whether it was corn or barley, distillers grains are going to have less sugar because the sugar was turned into alcohol, higher concentration of protein, and be a really good energy source. And I assure you right now, distillers grains are not cheap. So it just depends upon what we're looking for in our feed as to how and when a byproduct might be used, but it's not usually because of cost. The cost can be a benefit depending on the byproduct, but they're not all cheap, I assure you. And then the final one, this is one that is more recent than the other misconceptions and myths that I want to talk to you about tonight, but it gets a lot of press, especially on the internet, and that has to do with soy. That soy is dangerous, or soy is toxic, or soy shouldn't be included in horse feed. So I want to tell you why we include soy. And again, it's not because it's cheap. I assure you it is not. Most grains are much cheaper than soy. What soy is a very high quality protein source. So grains like corn and oats and barley are very low in essential amino acids like lysine and methionine. But soy is a legume, just like alfalfa is, and therefore it's a much higher quality protein source for any animal's diet. Now, just as there can be a horse that reacts badly to alfalfa, or a horse that reacts badly to oats or to corn, there can be a horse occasionally that doesn't do well on soy. However, there is no research evidence to suggest that soy causes metabolic dysfunction, that it is dangerous to the horse from a health perspective in any way. Raw soybeans can be a problem, but we don't feed raw soybeans to horses. We either use heat-treated whole soybeans, or more commonly, soybean meal or soy hulls as a feed ingredient that makes them digestible and makes them a high-quality feed ingredient for horses and other livestock species. So rest assured, soy is not the root of all evil. It's a really high quality protein source, and we use it to help improve the quality of the horse's feed to ensure we're getting a good, strong amino acid profile in that horse's diet that we can't get from typical grains like corn and oats. So to wrap up, we've talked about 5 common misconceptions when it comes to equine nutrition. There are a lot more out there. Maybe we'll do another one of these again in a few months. But I hope that I have provided some useful information for you in tonight's Equine Essentials video. As always, if you have specific questions, you can comment on the video and I'll be watching live with you to answer those, or you can email me at gray.parks@protritionfeed.com. Thank you all for joining me on this episode of Equine Essentials. I hope to see you all again next month.